have due process. And then each house must keep a journal of its proceedings. It's called the Congressional Record, which is published upon request of 1/5 of those present, and the journal must record individual votes on issues. Everything that happens in Congress is to go in to the Congressional Record except those parts that are deemed secret, that need to be classified because of the protection of the interests of the United States. Yes, Dave?
And the people have a right to see that.
Yes, you have a right. You can get the Congressional Record. That's not hard to get. And then under the Freedom of Information Act, you can request all kinds of other documents, although oftentimes, they have stuff marked out. And they have a very wide definition anymore of what is in the best interest of the United States for you and me not to see.
As long as they don't want you to see.
Yeah, under the Congressional Record, it's out there. It's probably every day published. It's about that thick. It has committee debates and evidence that's been entered in, and all kind of hearings and everything. Probably about that thick, usually printed on newsprint, and it's out there. And neither the House nor the Senate may adjourn for more than 3 days without the permission of the other House. Now, the reason for this is that this could be a political ploy. If the House is passing a piece of legislation and the Senate doesn't want to take it up, they could just say, hey, we're out of here, and then there would be no way that legislative process could take place on the other side, too. So they cannot adjourn for more than 3 days without the permission of the other House. They may not change their meeting place without the consent of the other, and both houses must be meeting in the same place. Now, that's not necessarily an issue because they meet in the capital of the United States. However, after 9/11, there was a certain amount of discussion about the possibility that the plane that went down in Pennsylvania was heading for the Capitol, and would it be a good idea for part of them to meet in one place and part of them to meet some other place for safety. But I believe at that time that it was decided that was not constitutionally allowed. They have to be meeting in the same place. Section number 6, then, is not too long, so Sherry, do your thing.
Do you want me to read 5 or 6? I didn't read
Oh, I'm
5.
sorry. Did I jump ahead on 5? Forgive me.
And with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. Each house shall keep a journal of its proceedings, and from time to time publish the same, excepting such parts as may in their judgment require secrecy. And the yeas and nays of the members of either house on any question shall, at the desire of 1/5 of those present, be entered on the journal. Neither house during the session of Congress shall, without the consent of the other, adjourn for more than 3 days, nor to any other place than that in which the 2 houses shall be sitting.
All right, section number 6 establishes the fact that there will be salaries for Congress, establishes that they will be established by law. It also gives the Congress a certain amount of protection from arrest while they are serving, while they are attending their session of Congress. They cannot be arrested while they are on the floor of the Congress or traveling to or from the Congress unless it be for treason, a felony, or a breach of the peace, because the idea was that every man, and in this case now women, must have the freedom to express their ideas, to say whatever they feel needs to be said, the free expression of their opinion on the floor of the Congress without worrying about being arrested for slander or such. Members of Congress may not, Section 6 tells us, members of Congress may not hold any other civil office during their tenure. So if you're the mayor of Dayton, you cannot also be in Congress at that time. They may not hold any office that the Congress created during their tenure or for which the Congress had voted for a pay raise. Now, this is another interesting little quirk, because there are those who argue that Hillary Clinton did not constitutionally qualify to be Secretary of State because she was a senator from New York and voted for pay raises during that time. Now, my understanding, and I probably should check this, but my understanding is how they got around that was by saying she would not be paid at the rate for which she voted. She would be paid at the rate at which it was before she voted for that. Am I making myself clear? That was the way they got around it. But that's really not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says if you voted for a raise, you're not supposed to go after that job later on. But, man, you know, and you're wearing that Yankees ball cap, buddy, you got power. Okay, forget I said that. Okay, so that's that. Section number 7. A little bit longer, our time's getting a little bit short, so what I might have to ask you to do is to be willing to read 7 and 8 on your own, so you can say you're one of those few Americans who's actually read the Constitution. Section 7 actually deals with the legislative process. The Constitution is very specific that all revenue bills must originate in the House. Now, why do they have to originate in the House? Well, remember, at this time, the House is the only one of the two that's popularly elected. The other reason is this. Whether or not you are taxed is an extension of the use of your money, your personal property. So in the protection of your right to determine how your personal property is acquired and used by government, the House, who is to be your representative, the representatives of us, the people, have to begin all revenue bills. The Senate, however, must concur. All legislation, the Constitution says, must start in the Congress. The President may suggest or request, but the office of the President of the United States is not to actually draft or attempt to introduce legislation. Congress, the President may veto a bill. Even though the House and the Senate both agree when it must have presidential signature. If the President does not agree, he may veto that bill. Now, for a long time we've been hearing, give me the line item veto, give me the line item veto. What a lot of us don't understand is there was a period of about 6 or 7 years, I think, where there was a line item veto, and that was found unconstitutional because the Constitution says they will present a bill, and the President will either sign it or veto it. The court decided that meant in totality. He could not pick and choose those parts he would enforce as his role as the executive, and that which he would ignore. So until the federal courts change their standing on this, he must either accept or reject the entire bill. If he rejects the entire bill, the Congress still can pass it, but with a higher bar. 2/3 majority are taken to overcome a presidential veto. However, there is what is called the pocket veto. And that is, if the Congress passes a piece of legislation, sends it to the President, and he, or perhaps sometimes she, decides simply to let it lay and does nothing with it for 10 days, it automatically becomes law. So we have legislation in that way. Any legislation not directly vetoed by the President can become law without the President's signature unless Congress adjourns in 10 days, and then it is dead. So there is this dance between the two departments about, are you in session, how long will you be, and so forth. Section number 8, we're going to go down the specifics. But before we do, I want to point out that although Gouverneur Morris wrote a great deal of the Constitution when it actually came down to putting it on paper, Noah Webster wrote Article 1, Section 8. And I think it's interesting when we begin this section to have a quote from Mr. Webster. In my view, the Christian religion is the most important and one of the first things in which all children under a free government ought to be instructed. No truth is more evident to my mind than that the Christian religion must be the basis of any government intended to secure the rights and privileges of a free people. Noah Webster was a man of incredible brilliance. The 1828 dictionary was his work because he believed that he who defines the terms wins the debate. So he wanted to have a very clear idea of what words meant, not in England, but what they meant in America. I believe that Noah Webster spoke 27 different languages, most of which he taught himself. So this is not a dummy writing Section 1, or Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Going very quickly, we are going to see the powers that are given to the Congress. Specifically, Section 8 says it is the Congress that should have the power to tax and to spend, but within very limited parameters. They are tax and spend for the, now this is interesting, to pay debt. Not to create debt, but to pay debt. The Congress has the power to tax and spend for common defense, for the military, which is, they have a very different idea we're going to see in a few minutes, and the general welfare. As we said, it had to be good for everybody in the country. It had to be good for the United States of America as a whole. Now, the reason I've put this court decision here, Stewart Machine Company versus David in 1937, is probably the seminal decision that eroded that once and for all. It gave Congress the power to tax some groups and to subsidize others based upon this idea that the subsidized group will spend more and thus stimulate the economy, stimulate the general welfare. That started in 1937, right after, we're right in the Depression era. This decision virtually obliterated any constitutional difference that we had between general and specific welfare, and it vastly expanded federal power. So that's why I put it there. The Congress has the power to tax and spend for the levying of taxes that are uniform throughout the United States. Another interesting little tidbit. If you're paying for something in Ohio, shucks, you're supposed to be paying for it out in wherever Ben Nelson is from. Everybody is supposed to pay equally. You're not supposed to have the Louisiana purchases and the special deals that say, all right, if you'll vote for this or that and the other, your people in your state won't have to bear the burden for that. The Constitution specifically states that the levying of taxes must be uniform throughout the United States.